Put the ring down, Callum. She is gone. She signed the papers this morning. So why are you standing in the middle of Whole Foods on Lamar holding a 2-carat ring like she's still coming back? The Saturday morning crowd inside Whole Foods Market on Lamar Boulevard in Austin, Texas went very still. A woman gripping a basket of organic peaches froze mid-reach. A man in a cycling jersey quietly backed his cart around the corner. 2 teenage boys filming something on their phones suddenly pointed the cameras somewhere else. And Callum Devereaux, 38 years old, CEO of a $280 million clean tech company, a man who stood in front of investors and senators and never once lost his composure, stood in the middle of the produce section with a ring box open in his palm and absolutely nothing left to say. His brother Tate was still talking. Something about pride. Something about letting go. Something about it being over. Callum heard none of it, because across the aisle, past the stacked pyramids of heirloom tomatoes, past the handwritten chalkboard signs for locally sourced honey, a woman was watching him. She wasn't staring the way the others were. She wasn't embarrassed for him or entertained by him. She was looking at him, the way someone looks at a mirror they didn't mean to walk past, like she recognized something, like she knew exactly what it felt like to be holding something you should have already put down. He closed the ring box. She looked away. And neither of them knew yet that in 48 hours, their lives would be completely different. But this story doesn't begin here. It begins 6 months earlier, in 2 separate cities, with 2 people who had each, in their own way, decided that love was a game they were done playing. Miami in March is the kind of beautiful that feels almost offensive when your life is falling apart. The sky over Brick Hill was a specific shade of blue that shows up in travel magazines, the kind that makes people feel like they're missing something even when they're standing right inside it. Bougainvillea blazed hot pink over every wall and fence. The bay sparkled. The whole city smelled like salt and possibility. Avery Beaumont sat in the parking lot of Winn-Dixie on Southwest 7th Avenue and cried so hard she couldn't see the steering wheel. Not elegant crying. Not the kind they show in movies. Single tear, mascara preserve, lip quiver. This was the ugly kind. The full body, can't catch your breath, snot and everything kind. The kind that only comes when something you believed in with your whole chest turns out to have been a lie for longer than you knew. The lie, in this case, had a name, Brandon Keefe. Brandon, who she had dated for 3 years. Brandon, who had told her in January that he wasn't ready to get engaged because he needed more time to be sure. Brandon, who she found out 2 hours ago from a mutual friend's Instagram story of all the undignified ways, had gotten engaged last weekend to a woman named Chrissy with a ring that cost more than Avery's car. 3 years. 3 years of being told she was asking for too much, wanting too fast, pushing too hard. 3 years of shrinking herself into the shape of a woman who wouldn't scare him away. And it turned out he just hadn't wanted her. Avery Beaumont was 34 years old. She was a licensed architect with her own small firm in Coral Gables. She had run a half marathon in January. She made the best red velvet cake in any room she walked into. She was, by every external measure, a woman who had her life together. She was also a woman who had just spent 22 minutes crying in a Winn-Dixie parking lot and was now going inside to buy comfort food because she had to eat something, and she refused to spend the next 6 hours ordering DoorDash and watching reality TV like a cliché. She wiped her face, checked her reflection in the visor mirror, looked terrible, decided she didn't care. She went inside. The Winn-Dixie on 7th Avenue was her grocery store, had been for 4 years. She knew every aisle. She knew which checkout lane moved fastest and which produce section received deliveries on Thursdays. She walked straight to the ice cream freezer, selected a pint of Häagen-Dazs salted caramel, and stood there for a long moment with the cold air on her face, letting it steady her. "The dulce de leche is better," said a voice beside her. She turned. A woman about her age, maybe a year or 2 older, with natural hair pulled up in a high puff and a kind of warm brown skin that looked lit from within, was standing 2 feet away holding a basket of groceries. She nodded at the Häagen-Dazs. Salted caramel is the Heartbreak flavor. You want dulce de leche. It's the moving forward flavor. Avery blinked. How do you know I'm not just buying ice cream? The woman gave her a look so gentle and so knowing that Avery felt her chin tremble for a second. Girl, I've been where you're standing. Swap the flavor. Trust me. Her name was Renata Osei. She was a pediatric nurse at Jackson Memorial. She had gone through a divorce 16 months ago and had been, as she put over their impromptu 45-minute parking lot conversation afterward, in the business of radical honesty with myself ever since. Avery told her everything about Brandon. Renata listened without rushing her, without offering solutions, without making her feel foolish. She just listened, the way someone listens when they actually know that sometimes being heard is the whole thing a person needs. By the time they exchanged numbers, Avery's chest felt 3 pounds lighter. She went home that night, ate the dulce de leche, and made a list. Not a grief list, not a pros and cons of her failed relationship, a different kind of list. Things she had wanted to do that Brandon had quietly, consistently discouraged. Weekend trips. A renovation project she'd been drawing plans for in her spare time for 2 years. A solo vacation. An architecture conference in Austin. Texas she'd registered for and then backed out of twice. She reopened the registration link. She clicked confirm. Have you ever made yourself smaller for someone who was never going to choose you? If Avery's story is already sitting somewhere real in your chest, stay with us. Subscribe and don't leave. Because what happens when she gets to Austin will change everything you think you know about second chances. Austin, Texas in March smells like cedar and rain and someone else's bonfire. Callum Devereaux had lived in Austin for 11 years, ever since he left his family's old money Houston world behind, and moved here to build something that was actually his. He had done that. Devereaux Clean Energy Solutions occupied 4 floors of a building on Congress Avenue, employed 214 people, and had just been shortlisted for a Department of Energy partnership worth $50 million. He also had, as of 8 weeks ago, no fiancée. Her name had been Meredith Hale, a corporate attorney, sharp and formidable and genuinely brilliant, and they had been together for 2 years before Callum had proposed in December in a rooftop restaurant on South Congress with a view of the whole city spread out below them like a promise. She had said yes. She had said yes and then, 6 weeks later, come home from a work trip to Dallas and sat across from him in their kitchen on Barton Hills Drive and said the thing he hadn't seen coming. Callum, I love you, but I don't want to marry you. I want to marry the version of you that exists when this company doesn't need you. And I don't know if that version is ever going to show up. She had moved out within the week. Clean, efficient, the way Meredith did everything. What followed for Callum was not a breakdown. It was something quieter and in some ways more damaging, a slow, methodical numbing. He poured himself into the DOE proposal. He restructured 2 departments. He worked until the building was empty and then worked some more. He ran Town Lake at 5 every morning because running was the one thing that required his body and left no room for his mind. His brother Tate, who ran the company's Austin Community Partnerships division and was deeply unimpressed by Callum's coping mechanisms, staged what he called an intervention at Whole Foods on Lamar because Tate believed important conversations should happen in public spaces where you couldn't yell. That was the morning of the ring. Callum had been carrying it for 8 weeks. Not because he thought Meredith was coming back. He knew she wasn't. He respected her too much to pretend otherwise, but because putting it away felt like closing a door he wasn't sure he was ready to close. Tate had found it in Callum's jacket pocket while borrowing it for a client dinner, and the confrontation in the Whole Foods produce section had been, as Tate later described it, a whole thing. The woman across the aisle, the one who'd looked at him like a mirror, had been gone by the time Callum put the ring box in his pocket and walked out. He didn't know her name. He didn't know she had just flown into Austin from Miami that morning for a 3-day architecture conference at the JW Marriott on 2nd Street. He didn't know she was staying 4 blocks from his office. He didn't know anything about her except that she had looked at him, really looked, in a moment when it felt completely invisible, and something about that had lodged itself somewhere in his chest like a splinter he couldn't locate. 2 people, 2 cities, 2 kinds of broken. And they just stood 3 feet apart in a grocery store in Austin, Texas, and neither of them knew it yet. If you believe some meetings are not accidents, subscribe right now. Because this story is about to become everything. The Texas Architecture and Design Summit ran Friday through Sunday at the JW Marriott on 2nd Street in downtown Austin. 200 architects, designers, and urban planners crammed into conference rooms and breakout sessions and networking happy hours with name badges and bad small talk. Avery loved all of it. She had forgotten, in the years of making herself smaller for Brandon, that she was genuinely good at this, at the professional version of herself, at walking into a room full of people who spoke her language and feeling, for the first time in a long time, like she was exactly the right size. On Saturday morning, she slipped out of a breakout session on sustainable urban design 20 minutes early. The presenter had essentially been reading his own slides back to the room, which Avery found personally offensive, and went looking for coffee. The Marriott Lobby Cafe had a line. She found a smaller coffee bar tucked around the corner near the hotel side entrance, ordered a quart of dew, and took it to a high-top table by the window that looked out onto 2nd Street. Austin on a Saturday morning moved differently than Miami. Less humidity, more space between things. The Congress Avenue Bridge was visible 2 blocks down. A woman was walking a pair of enormous golden retrievers on the sidewalk below. A food truck had set up on the corner and already had a line. She was making notes on the session she'd just left. She always processed conferences by writing what she wished the presenter had said instead. When the chair across from her scraped back, "Is this seat?" the man stopped. She looked up. They both went very still. It was him. Whole Foods. Produce section. Ring box. The eyes. He recognized her a half-second later. She watched it cross his face. The same flash of something that wasn't quite recognition and wasn't quite coincidence, but sat in the space between both. "The mirror woman," he said softly, before he could stop himself. "I'm sorry." He shook his head slightly. "Nothing. Sorry. Is this seat taken?" "It is now, apparently," she said. He sat. He had a black coffee and a look about him that said he'd been up since before the sun, which he had. Town Lake, 5 miles. The city still dark and cool and mercifully quiet. "You're at the architecture conference?" she asked. "No, I have an office 4 blocks from here. I come to this coffee bar because the Marriott lobby is the only place in downtown Austin with a longer line." He paused. "You're at the conference." "I am. I snuck out a session." "Wasn't worth it?" The man was literally reading his own slides. Out loud. To architects who can read. She said it with such dry precision that he almost smiled. "Almost. I'm Avery Beaumont. Miami. Callum Devereaux. Austin." He reached across the table, and they shook hands. "You were at Whole Foods yesterday morning." "You were the man with the ring box," she said very evenly. The almost smile disappeared. He looked at his coffee. "Yeah." She didn't push it. She didn't ask the follow-up question the way most people would have. She just let it sit there, acknowledged, respected, undisturbed, and went back to her notes, which was, though neither of them would have articulated it this way, exactly the right thing to do. They stayed for an hour. She showed him the notes she was writing. Her actual thoughts on sustainable design embedded in her critique of the presenter's missed opportunities, and he read them with a focused attention that was neither patronizing nor performative. "This is good," he said, not inflated. "Just true." "I know," she said. He laughed. "A real one. The first one in a while that didn't sound manufactured." "You always do that?" he asked. "What?" "Agree when someone compliments you instead of deflecting." She considered this. "I used to deflect. Decided recently it was a waste of everyone's time." She capped her pen. "You're in clean energy." "How did you—" "Your shirt. Devereaux Clean Energy Solutions. Unless you just wear other companies' branded gear, which would be odd." He looked down at the faded company logo on his chest. He'd thrown on the first thing he grabbed this morning. "Fair catch. Is the company doing well?" "On paper, yes. Personally," he stopped, looked out the window at Congress Avenue. "I'm navigating something." "Me too," she said simply. They looked at each other across the small table. 2 people who had arrived at the same hour in the same coffee bar, carrying the same specific weight. The kind that comes from loving the wrong person for too long and having the clarity to finally painfully know it. "Can I ask you something?" he said. "You can ask." "Yesterday morning, in the store, you looked at me like you—" He searched for the word. "Like you knew something." Avery was quiet for a moment. "I recognize a look," she said finally, "of someone holding on to something they know they need to put down. I've been wearing that same look for about 3 years. A beat. It gets easier when you finally set it down. For what it's worth." He stared at her. She picked up her cord-to-do like she hadn't just said the truest thing anyone had said to him in 8 weeks. Saturday afternoon, the conference had a block of unstructured networking time from 2 to 5, which was conference language for we ran out of programming. Avery had planned to walk the city. Callum had planned to go back to the office. Instead, standing on the sidewalk outside the Marriott at 1:58 p.m., they both happened to be leaving at the same time, and Callum said, without entirely meaning to, "I could show you the city, the non-tourist version." Avery looked at him for exactly 2 seconds. "Okay," she said. He showed her South Congress first. The stretch of it that felt like a small town inside a big city, the vintage shops and the bookstore and the food trucks, and the way the street opened up at the end to give you the Capitol Dome, sitting at the top of the hill like punctuation. She pointed out 3 buildings along the route, told him what the architects got right, and what they compromised, talked about the interplay between commercial pressure and design integrity with the specific fluency of someone who lived inside that tension every day. He listened the way very few people listen, without waiting for his turn to speak. They got Franklin barbecue brisket from a truck on East 11th because the main location's line was already 2 hours and Callum knew the truck. They ate on a low stone wall in the afternoon sun, and she told him about her firm in Coral Gables. 6 employees, a waiting list of clients, a renovation project she'd been designing for herself for 2 years that she kept postponing. "Why do you keep postponing it?" he asked. She peeled back the butcher paper on her brisket. "Because it was always going to be a home for 2, and I kept waiting for the 2 to materialize." A pause. "It didn't. You could build it for 1. I know that now." She said like a decision that had only just finished being made. "I do." He told her about Devereaux Clean Energy, the real version, not the press release version. The early years in shared workspace on E6 with 2 employees, and a business plan his family thought was foolish. The first major contract, the restructuring that had kept him awake for 60 nights straight. The DOE proposal that was currently either going to be the biggest thing his company had ever done or a very expensive lesson. "Do you believe it'll work?" she asked. "Yes." "Then it will." She said it without embellishment. Just like that. "You know your work. I could tell that in the first 5 minutes. People who know their work and believe in it, they find a way." She looked at him. "The question isn't whether the company works out. The question is what you're going to do about the other thing." He was quiet for a long time. A kid on a skateboard rolled past. Somewhere down the street, a band was doing a sound check. She wasn't wrong. He said finally, "Meredith, she said I wasn't present, that the company always came first. And I argued with her about it, but he stopped. She was right. I have a bad habit of being completely committed to things that don't require me to be vulnerable. Work is safe. Work you can control. People can leave," Avery said. "Yeah. They can also stay," she said, "if you actually show up for them." The afternoon light had gone gold and long. Congress Avenue glowed. The city was doing its Saturday thing, easy and alive and entirely unbothered by the 2 people sitting on a stone wall eating brisket, and being more honest than either of them had been with anyone in a long time. They walked Barton Springs Road as the sun went down. She photographed the bungalows along the creek, the scale of them, the way they sat in the landscape. He told her about the neighborhood's history, the way Austin had changed, the things he'd watched disappear, and the things that had stubbornly stayed. By the time they ended up at an outdoor bar on South Lamar, the kind with picnic tables and string lights and a live band covering Texas country, the ease between them had the quality of something that had been building for much longer than one afternoon. "This wasn't what I planned for today," she said. "Me either." "It was better," she said. He looked at her in the string light glow. "Yeah," he said, "it really was." Sunday was the last day of the conference. Avery presented a panel on adaptive reuse and affordable housing at 10 a.m. One of the sessions she'd actually come to Austin for, and she was, as the moderator told her afterward, the best speaker of the entire summit. She received 3 business cards and a LinkedIn connection request before she'd even left the room. Callum had not planned to attend the conference, but at 9:45, he found himself walking into the Marriott event level, asking a volunteer in a lanyard where the adaptive reuse panel was, and sitting in the back row 2 minutes before Avery walked to the podium. He watched her work, and something shifted in him, quietly, irrevocably, the way tectonic plates shift. You don't feel the movement, but when it's done, nothing is where it was. She was extraordinary, not in the polished, practiced, corporate way he was used to, but in the specific way of someone who has earned every word they're saying and knows it. She spoke about buildings the way he had heard her speak about the bungalows on Barton Springs Road, with love and precision, and a complete refusal to be less than honest about what wasn't working. She didn't see him in the audience. He didn't stay for questions. He went back to his office, sat at his desk, and stared out the window at 2nd Street for a long time. Then he picked up the ring box from his desk drawer. He'd put it there after the Whole Foods incident. Unable to take it home, opened it, looked at it for the last time, and closed it. He called his brother. "I'm going to return the ring," he said when Tate picked up. "Today." Tate was quiet for a moment. "What changed?" "I met someone," Callum said. And then, because it was Tate, "Not like that. I don't know what I mean. I just met someone who reminded me what it looks like to be honest. About yourself. In front of another person. Without losing anything." A pause. "I forgot that was possible. Do you know her name?" Tate asked. "Avery Beaumont. Architect from Miami. She flies home tonight." A long silence. Then Tate said very carefully, "Callum, go find her." The conference closing reception was at 5 p.m. in the Marriott's rooftop terrace. The kind of event where people exchange the last of their business cards and promise to stay in touch and mostly never did. Callum arrived at 4:58. He found her near the terrace railing, looking out at the Austin skyline with a glass of wine, and the particular expression of someone who is trying to hold the shape of a place before they have to leave it. "You were at my panel," she said without turning around. He stopped. "How did you?" "I saw you in the back row when I was walking out, after the questions." She turned. "You left before I could." She stopped. "Why did you come?" He held her gaze. "Because I wanted to see you do the thing you love. And I was right to..." He paused. "You were remarkable, Avery." Something crossed her face. Not the practiced deflection he might have expected, but something much more unguarded. A woman receiving something real, and not quite knowing what to do with the weight of it. "I returned the ring today," he said. She was quiet. "Not because of you," he said quickly. "I want to be clear about that. It was time. It should have happened weeks ago." "But," he paused, "but talking to you yesterday reminded me what it looks like to be honest. With another person. Without armor. And I realized I'd been carrying that ring the same way I was carrying everything else. Like if I just held on long enough, I wouldn't have to actually feel anything." The Austin skyline sat behind her in the early evening light. Downtown glittered. The Congress Bridge was lit up over the Colorado River. "I do that too," she said softly. "Hold on. Past the point where holding on makes any sense." She looked at her wine glass. "Brandon didn't choose me. He was never going to choose me. And I spent 3 years trying to be someone he might eventually choose, instead of just being who I am." She looked up. "You know what the worst part is?" "What?" I knew the whole time. I just didn't want to know it." The terrace had filled up around them. Music played softly. Voices overlapped. The whole closing reception was happening, and neither of them was quite in it. "You fly home tonight," he said. 9:15. Austin Bergstrom. "Have dinner with me. Before you go." He said it without rehearsal. I just don't want this to be a conference thing that ends when the conference ends. I don't think that's what this is." She looked at him for a long time. Long enough that he thought she was going to say no. Long enough that he prepared himself for the specific disappointment of a door not opening. "I have to be at the airport by 7:30, she said. We have 2.5 hours, he said. Then we shouldn't waste them, she said. She said yes to dinner. Two broken people, both finally honest about their wounds, sitting across from each other with 2.5 hours before she flies back to Miami. If you are holding on to something you know you need to put down, this story is for you. Subscribe, because what happens at that dinner table will stay with you long after the story ends. They went to Laundrette on E6, a restaurant she had read about in a design magazine, once for its renovation of a 1930s laundromat, all terrazzo floors and warm plaster and light that made everyone look like a painting. She had pointed out on Saturday's walk and said, "I'd eat there in another life," and he had filed it without comment. When they walked in and she realized, she stopped in the doorway. "You remembered," she said. "You mentioned it." "I mentioned it once, in passing, 24 hours ago." "I listen," he said simply. She stood in the doorway of the 1930s laundromat turned restaurant in the terrazzo light and felt something she had promised herself she was done feeling. She felt it anyway. They ordered wine and wood-fired vegetables and a pasta that the waiter described with reverence and ate across from each other in the booth in the back and talked. Really talked. The way you talk when you know the clock is running and there is no room left for anything less than the truth. She told him about her father, a building contractor from Carroll City who had built things with his hands his whole life and died when she was 26, still working, still proud, still believing the next project would be the one that set everything right. She told him how that had shaped her relationship to work, the sacredness of building something real, the terror of stopping. "You build so you don't have to sit still," he said. "And when I'm still, I feel everything I've been running from." "I know that exact feeling," he said. "My company is the most comfortable thing I've ever built, and it's also the place I go so I don't have to be anywhere harder." Meredith named it. Avery said, "She did." He was quiet for a moment. "She's a good person. She needed someone who could show up for a life outside of work. And I didn't know how to do that. I'm not sure I know how to do it now." He looked at her. "But I think I want to learn." "That's the difference," she said. "Wanting to." Brandon never wanted to. Brandon wanted someone to make him feel chosen without him having to do the choosing. He wanted the comfort of a relationship without the responsibility of one. She swirled her wine. "The ring he gave Chrissy is enormous. I saw it on Instagram, and my first reaction was, good, because if he had given me something like that, I would have known it was just a purchase, not a promise." "What's the difference?" "A purchase is about the giver feeling generous. A promise is about the receiver feeling seen." She paused. "The ring you had in Whole Foods, was it a purchase or a promise?" He thought about it honestly. "It started as a promise, and then when she ended it, it became a thing I was carrying to prove something. I'm not sure what." He met her eyes. "That's why it needed to go." She nodded slowly. They stayed at the table until the restaurant filled, and the noise level rose, and the waiter came back twice before they let him clear their plates. They talked about architecture and clean energy and the strange overlapping ethics of both, how you build things for the future when the future keeps shifting. They talked about Austin versus Miami, the different ways each city exhaled. They talked about small things, her cat, his obsessive running habit, the best breakfast in Coral Gables, whether Franklin barbecue was worth the line. She said yes. He said the truck was better. They agreed to disagree. At 7:10, her phone buzzed with flight reminder. They both looked at it. "I have to go," she said. "I know." Neither of them moved. This was, she started, stopped. "I came to Austin to remember who I am when I'm not making myself smaller for someone. And she shook her head slightly. "I wasn't expecting this part." "Neither was I," he said. "What do we do with it?" she asked. He looked at her steadily. "I don't want to promise you something I'm not sure I know how to keep yet. But I also don't want to let you walk out of here and pretend this was just a conference weekend. So don't," she said quietly. He reached across the table. Not for her hand, just close enough that the choice was hers. She put her hand over his. One breath. "Miami is not Austin," she said. "I know." His thumb moved once across her knuckles. But I've been to Miami exactly once, which means I don't actually know it at all. And I think, he looked at her, I think I'd like to know it the way you know it. 7:12. She squeezed his hand once, let go, and reached for her jacket. Then come, she said, and I'll show you. Two broken people, slowly, carefully, becoming each other's healing. Not in a fairy tale way. In a real way. The slow, deliberate, honest way. If you've ever been in a love that felt like finally exhaling after holding your breath for years, subscribe and stay. Because this story is about to give you the ending you deserve. For months in, the Department of Energy rejected the Devereaux proposal. Not entirely. They issued a revise and resubmit, which in DOE language meant the core idea was solid, but the execution timeline was too aggressive and two of the projected outcomes needed stronger data backing. The partnership director called Callum personally, which was a good sign. The 90-day revision window was a reasonable one. Callum still took it like a physical blow. He called Avery at 7 p.m. on a Tuesday, 2 hours after the call. She heard it in his voice before he'd finished the second sentence. "Tell me," she said. He told her. All of it. Not just a decision, but what it meant for the team, for the 18 months of work, for the 3 people he'd hired specifically for this project. He talked for 10 minutes without stopping, and she let him. When he finished, she was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Revise and resubmit." "Yeah. So they want it. They just need you to make it better." Avery. "Callum, they called you personally. That's not a rejection. That's an invitation." Her voice was measured and certain. "You know this. You're in the feeling right now, but you know this." He exhaled slowly. "Yeah. What do you need tonight?" "To not be in my own head." "Okay, I'll stay on the phone. Tell me about the 3 people you hired for the project. Tell me what they do." So he did. He told her about his lead engineer, Priya, 29, and already the sharpest systems mind he'd ever hired. About his data analyst, Deshawn, who had a gift for making complex projections legible to non-technical audiences. About his project manager, Cora, who had come from a DOE contractor and knew the submission process better than anyone. These are the people who are going to fix the proposal. Avery said, "Yeah, then let them, and you do the part only you can do," which is tell the story of what this company believes. Not the data. You have people for the data. Tell them why this matters. That's the part only you know. He sat with that. Then he said, Avery, I know," she said quietly. "Me too." Neither of them said the word. Not yet, but it was there. It had been there for a while. It was just waiting for the moment when both of them were ready to say it out loud without flinching. The revised DOE proposal went in 7 weeks later. Priya restructured the timeline. Deshawn rebuilt the data projections. Cora caught 3 process errors that would have delayed review by 60 days. And Callum wrote a 16-page narrative introduction to the proposal. The story of why clean energy was not a policy choice, but a moral one, rooted in what his company had learned from the people and communities it served. Tate read it and said quietly, "This is the best thing you've ever written." "I had help," Callum said. Spring came back around. Miami in March again. The sky the same offensive blue, the bougainvillea rioting, the bay catching light. But this year Avery Beaumont was standing on a newly poured concrete foundation on a quiet street in Coral Gables, watching her house begin to exist in the world. Her house. Not for 2. For her. And then, as she had said to Callum 6 months ago on that empty lot in the golden evening light, they'd see. She was wearing a hard hat and holding a set of her own drawings and talking with her site foreman about the rooftop garden framing when her phone rang. The DOE approved the proposal. She went completely still. Full partnership. $52 million over 4 years. Project started in September. His voice had something in it she had never heard before. Not just relief, not just professional satisfaction, but something deeper and more personal. The sound of a man who has proven something important to himself. "We did it, Avery." "You did it," she said. You and Priya and Deshaun and Cora, and the best narrative introduction to a federal proposal probably ever written. He laughed. The full one, the real one, the kind that had been getting easier and more frequent over the past 6 months. I'm coming to Miami this weekend, he said. I know. I already put you on the parking pass for the building site. I need to talk to you. In person. There's something I want to say, and I want to say it in person. She knew what it was. She had known for a while. She had been sitting with her own version of the same thing, waiting until it felt like the right time, not the romantic movie right time, but the real right time, the one that comes when two people have been honest enough with each other that the big thing doesn't feel like a risk anymore. It feels like the most obvious next true thing. Then come, she said. I'll be at Winn-Dixie on 7th Saturday morning. 9 a.m. He paused. Winn-Dixie? It's where things start for me, she said simply. He was there at 8:55. She found him in the frozen food aisle. Not the flower section, not the produce section, just the frozen food aisle, standing in front of the ice cream freezer with the cold air on his face and an expression of complete, undefended openness. In his hand, a pint of Haagen-Dazs salted caramel. She stopped. You told me, he said, that salted caramel is a Heartbreak flavor. And he held it up, I want to retire it. I want to finish this flavor and then be done with Heartbreak altogether. If that's something you're interested in doing with me. She stared at him. I'm not proposing, he said quickly. I want to be clear. This is not a proposal. This is a declaration, a statement of intent. The proposal, if and when it happens, will be significantly better planned and will not involve a grocery store. Probably. Probably? She was fighting a smile. I can't fully commit to that. You've established a pattern. He looked at her steadily. What I am saying is, I love you, Avery. I have loved you since you told me the truth about myself in a hotel coffee bar in Austin, and then walked away like it was nothing. And I want to stop being the man who works until the building is empty. I want to build something with you, not just our companies. A life, whatever that means for two people who live in different cities and are both still figuring out how to be fully present for another person. She looked at the salted caramel ice cream. She looked at the man holding it, this specific man who listened without waiting for his turn, who remembered the restaurant she mentioned in passing, who had sat in the back row of her panel because he wanted to watch her do the things she loved, who had carried a ring for 8 weeks because letting go was hard, and then let it go because he finally understood what he actually needed to hold on to. You're going to leave cabinet doors open, she said. He blinked. What? You strike me as a man who leaves cabinet doors open. I need to know that going in. He thought about it with the seriousness it deserved. Probably. Yeah. And you run at 5 a.m., which means if I'm ever staying in Austin, you're going to wake me up. You could come with me. I am not a 5 a.m. person, Callum. I know. I'll be quiet. His voice was soft now. Avery, I love you. Cabinet doors and all. What do you say? A woman in the next aisle had gone very quiet. A stock boy at the end of the freezer section was studying the ceiling with great intensity. Avery Beaumont, who had cried in this parking lot a year ago, who had chosen the dulce de leche, who had clicked confirm on a conference registration and flown to Austin and found something she hadn't gone looking for, felt her chest open. All the way, completely, without counting. I love you too, she said. I have for a while. I was waiting until it felt safe to say it. Does it feel safe now? It feels like the truest thing in this grocery store, she said, which is saying something because the produce section is excellent. He laughed, the full, real laugh, and she stepped forward, and he put his arms around her right there in the frozen food aisle of the Winn-Dixie on Southwest 7th Avenue, with the cold air spilling out the open freezer, and a Stevie Wonder song playing faintly on the store sound system, and a stock boy pretending very hard not to watch. It was not a perfect moment. It was better than perfect. It was real. They ate the salted caramel ice cream together on her rooftop that evening. The Miami skyline did its thing. Somewhere a boat moved across the bay. The city exhaled around them the way Miami exhales in the early evening, warm and salt-heavy and full of itself in the best possible way. What happens now? He asked. Now, she said, we figure it out together. which is different from figuring it out alone, which is what I've been doing for 34 years. Different how? She considered this. Harder in some ways. Better in all the ways that matter. He handed her the ice cream container. She took the last bite. Dulce de leche next time, she announced. Why? Because salted caramel is the heartbreak flavor. She looked at him, and the real smile came, the full one, the one she'd been rediscovering for the past year. And I'm done with Heartbreak. The house on the quiet street in Coral Gables was finished 14 months later. Avery stood in the rooftop garden on opening day with Renata and her mother and the 6 people from her office who had built it with her, and she felt her father's presence in the walls, in the craftsmanship, in the quality, in the absolute refusal to do anything less than right. Callum flew in from Austin for the opening. He stood in the front porch doorway, the one that faced the street, because Avery believed houses should face the street, and looked at the house and then at the woman who had designed every inch of it. It's extraordinary, he said. I know, she said. I built it. He moved to Miami 18 months after they met. Opened a Miami office of Devereaux Clean Energy Solutions, a natural move with the DOE partnership funding a project on the Florida coast. Tate called it the best business decision Callum had ever made. Callum said it wasn't a business decision at all. He left cabinet doors open. She left her shoes by the front door. He ran at 5 a.m., and she slept through it. She worked on Sundays, and he brought her coffee without being asked. They argued about restaurants and agreed about everything that mattered. On the night of their first anniversary, they went back to Winn-Dixie on Southwest 7th Avenue. Not for anything in particular, just because. They walked the frozen food aisle, stood in front of the ice cream freezer. She picked up the salted caramel. He picked up the dulce de leche. They looked at each other. Both, she said. Both, he agreed. They went home. They ate both flavors on the rooftop of the house that faced the street, with the Miami skyline laid out in front of them like everything that had ever been possible, and talked until midnight about nothing and everything, the way you talk when you've stopped performing for each other and started simply being. 2 broken hearts, met by chance, choosing every day to stay whole together. Avery stopped making herself smaller. Callum stopped hiding behind his work. And in the frozen food aisle of a grocery store in Miami, they found the thing both of them had stopped believing in. If this story moves something in you, subscribe and leave a comment below. What would you do differently if you stopped being afraid of being chosen? Someone reading your answer needs to hear it.